Hey everybody, welcome back to another FUTRtech video podcast. Today we're talking to Tim Delisle, who's CEO of Datalogue, and our conversation goes all over the place from talking about leadership and sales to data. So stay tuned. Welcome back to another FUTRtech video podcast. Today we're going to be talking about data. Now, we've all heard that data is a strategic asset, and it has driven some significant changes in IT in its efforts to deliver greater top-line value to the business. Today I have with us Tim Delisle, CEO and co-founder of the data process automation company Datalogue, to talk about the importance of data and extracting the greatest value out of the data that we have. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And as usual, I have my partner in crime, Sunish Patel, with me.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Tim. Excited to be here.
So Tim, just to start off, how are you doing in this era of pandemic? How's your family doing?
Family's good. My wife's an ER nurse.
Oh, wow.
She's been kind of kicking around some volunteering hours. So interestingly, she left the ER to now start her own company. Doing some good work there. So she's been volunteering on weekends in the heydays of the quarantine. So we've been dealing with the whole come home, wash yourself clean, and kind of work through that process. But luckily, we haven't gotten sick. Everyone's doing quite good. And we're observing our little New York City quarantine rules.
Well, that's you have a really entrepreneurial household there then, huh?
Yeah, I think she somehow saw us go through the pain in the early days and magically said, "I want to go through that." I don't know how she concluded that. Maybe we felt a little crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot. Two entrepreneurs in one household is a lot to handle.
We one of our friends, she's the CEO of a company called Spring Health, and they do telemedicine for mental health for companies, and they are two entrepreneurs in a house. And I think we all concluded that they're aspirationally something we want to get to. So some people make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my days of entrepreneurship, and it was hard to maintain a relationship, let alone a marriage.
Yeah, it's unclear how it's all going to work, but we're been together 10 years. We're thinking we could probably get through 2 companies.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish you both the greatest success.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So, we wanted to talk about data today, and businesses discovered the value of data, and businesses are pushing, CIOs to deliver on the promise of adding value to the business with data. And it's not just CIOs, but CMOs as well, right? So, what are you seeing that people, organizations are, having? What are the challenges organizations are having with their data? What are the mistakes they're making? What are the CIOs and the CMOs out there, doing?
I think central to pretty much anything that becomes core to your business, right? It kind of starts and is relegated to a very small niche of your business. And then it ultimately grows and becomes a core part of pretty much every business unit, everything that you do. And I think we saw that in the digitization of the enterprise, right? Where software engineers were this group of people that were in IT, and then you used to file tickets and have very detailed specs for how you're going to go out and you're going to build a thing or a widget that you really needed for your organization, right? What we're seeing now is data is at the heart of pretty much any mature side of the business. So, for example, if you're a startup and you're going to be making decisions, are you going to go through the process of gathering, cleaning, analyzing all of your data? Probably not, right? You're still too early. A lot of it is still going to be done through qualitative interactions with your customers, et cetera. Still be gut feel. But when you're at scale and you're trying to squeeze every ounce of value from a business process, that's really where data comes in. So if you're digitized already, you've got these digital systems spewing all of this data. Now you need to go to town and analyze the underlying insights to squeeze out the benefits for your organization. So what we've seen is data in the past, I think 5-ish years has been relegated to the IT organization. Build a data engineering team, build a central data science team, build central analytics teams. And so far, what we've kind of experienced over working with these customers now for over 4 years is the democratization of those functions, and those functions breaking out of central IT and moving into the business. And in the same way that we have developers now that sit very close to our business units. So what we've seen is a path towards the democratization. And I think the main mistake that we're seeing people do is hold on to that function for too long.
Yeah.
Right. So the CIO who might be a little hungry on like, hey, these are my data systems, these data have a lot of power, like I don't want to let them go. I think those are the typical folks that we see making mistakes. Luckily enough, for the brands that we work with some of the largest companies in the world. You guys know some of that customer list. But those people have bought into this vision of democratization of the underlying data. And so we're seeing a lot of CIOs move towards that. A lot of folks move towards, hey, this is a central asset that everyone needs to get access to. And we're starting to see less and less of those mistakes of building these fiefdoms around your underlying data and making it available to the people in your BUs so that they can self-serve and analyze that underlying asset.
That's a really interesting concept. I mean, because I see that all the time in these organizations, and the reality is nobody knows what they need from the data better than the people who are going to use that data to make decisions, right?
Exactly, right.
And you're right. You see so much of the data sequestered in these groups and people controlling it and assuming they know what people need from the data, right? And now seeing the value that it brings to the organizations, the ability to bring it to the masses, as you say, is I can see the value in that, tremendous value in that.
Yeah, I think it's all kind of cutting the time to. Ultimately, what you want to get to is you want optimal time to market. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, there's a user, there's a consumer, there's a quote unquote customer for whatever insights you're going to be deriving from the data. And I think people have solved the problem of generating insights from data that's already usable. Like that's something that as companies, we've invested a ton of money in AI, ML, BI capabilities to actually generate insights from data. What we're seeing is the hardest part is getting that data into the self-service toolkit and making it usable so that you're not spending all of your days data wrangling, so that you're not spending all of your time asking for access to underlying systems and all of that stuff. And that's really where there's a lot of room for growth and innovation generally.
Yeah, I think, when we look at the evolution of technologies, I always use the example of the web. When the web first came out, everybody was hand coding HTML files and manually editing GIF files to make them as small as possible, and it was a real artisanal sort of approach to things. And then they kind of got like these sort of rudimentary tools in there that kind of automated some of the functions. Then we got into more elaborate design tools, and then that sort of evolved into content management platforms, and now it's just a SaaS-based service, right? Yeah. And it's sort of the natural evolution of things. And I think data's sort of starting to make that shift now too, and to the point where it's sort of accessible and usable by everyone. One of the things you said earlier was that small company, it's kind of a big company problem. Making use of data. I mean, do you see a role? I mean, when you start to look at that sort of evolution and making tools to make accessing the data easier, does that open up more data opportunities for the smaller players too?
Oh, for sure. I think what's interesting is the types of insights that you derive from small versus large data is actually very different, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, I can derive insights from my CRM, and I can look at longitudinally at, okay, I've got an opportunity with a particular customer. What's the probability of it closing? And I can maybe build a predictive model around, okay, like at a high level, when I've got these underlying checkboxes checked in my CRM, like I'm going to close this deal, or I think I'm going to close this deal, and here's the probability for doing so. You might be able to do that. Now, I might be able to do that extremely well if I've got 10,000 opportunities. Mm-hmm. right? And I've got 10,000 checkboxed or then 10,000 qualification criteria that I've been able to fill across all these opportunities. And so when I say it's a big company problem, it's not inherently company size that's a function of this. It's just historically, how much data do you have to be able to move from just, hey, I'm trying to show the current state of the world, to I'm trying to predict what's going to happen in the future based off the data that I have, to then finally I'm trying to react to a particular change in the data and kind of automate a business process from that. So we see analytics, when we think about it, as kind of a 3-stage approach. First, you explain something about the world, then you predict something about the world, and then you automate something based off of those predictions. And when I say it's a big company problem, it's that journey towards automation requires quite a bit of data, and you need a system that's relatively mature. For example, for me to be able to close out a deal, there's likely very low-hanging fruit, like making sure that everyone's giving the same pitch, that will actually improve the probability of closing a deal more so than anything that I can find in the underlying data. So I think more than size of company, what's important is you need a mature business process where you're actually capturing the underlying data that you're going to be able to use for insights. And that tends to happen with older, more mature companies, just because time seems to be the killer of all companies, and the ones that are most mature kind of tend to survive. So that's really the axis that I'm talking about when I'm talking about kind of size. Is probably more interesting to think about maturity of the business process, because at the end of the day, right, like if there's a very simple manual thing that you can do to improve that process and drive value for your organization, do the simple thing. If it's not mature enough for you to throw data scientists and data engineers, like those are expensive functions. Like, why are you using data in the first place? Go solve the low-hanging fruit, then move on to the higher order problems. Yeah.
So the other thing you mentioned when you were talking earlier is, sort of the rise of AI ML into the equation here. We were talking to John Thompson yesterday, and we were talking about sort of, how a couple of years ago, everybody on Sand Hill Road was investing in some AI ML company, right? And it was the path to a liquidity event for a lot of those companies seemed to be a lot longer than I think they anticipated, right? Do you feel that the dream of AI and ML has been realized yet, or where do you think it is on that spectrum?
Martin Casado has a pretty good piece on this around data moats and how those this idea that proprietary data is going to be the thing that you're going to need to build out in order to drive a lot of value. And that article probably gives, I think, the best overview of the data moat and how it really hasn't played out to be the thesis that I think a lot of those investors were investing on, which was, hey, this underlying data is going to be proprietary and you're going to be holding on to it. At the end of the day, you need a system to be able to generate those underlying assets. And if you don't have a valuable product that's going to generate those underlying assets, doesn't matter who you are, like you're not going to be able to generate that data moat that you're hoping to generate. And then if you're artificially creating that moat over time, what's preventing someone else from just buying the data that you're buying or doing these types of things? So I think the data moat is one of those pieces of the equation. And I think there's another component, which is a lot of machine learning and AI entrepreneurs kind of talked about this J curve. So when VCs look at investments and their portfolios, like they invest on a J curve, which is they invest a lot of money and then they see their returns go negative for a while, and then companies mature and then they start generating returns over time. So there's a period when you're looking at a fund where you've got negative returns. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs ended up hitting the market with this thesis that, hey, I can create a J curve company. And I think we early on were actually part of that. Like that was an operating model that we were going under, which is, hey, we're going to invest a lot of time and resources in building out these data sets, these underlying models that automate away all this grunt work. And you're going to see a J curve in our ability to generate value in the market. And very quickly we started looking at this and we started thinking, is there fundamentally a better way of doing that? Like, do I really need to be generating a J-curve company and like not generating returns for my investors for a long period of time? And I think the answer is absolutely there is, right? It's you build a valuable product that solves a manual process very, very effectively. Mm-hmm. You then leverage the learnings from that product to build the AI and the ML on the automations. And I would say that that's something that took us probably a good chunk of like a year or two, probably like the most of our seed funding to figure out, or at least for first round of seed funding that we had, to figure out that at the end of the day, product is key and product is king.
Yeah.
And if you're building a machine learning company without a king level product, I'm sure there are going to be winners, but I would put my money on organizations that have built incredibly effective product organizations that get away from this idea of I've got this J-curve return for my investors. So I think those were the two kind of fundamental theses, was like, hey, there's like this defensible moat, which is the data moat. And then there's this like new way to think about companies and the value that they generate. And frankly, I think both of those theses have played out to be only valid in very exceptional cases.
Yeah. Well, I like what you're saying, because I think, one of the things that we see a lot of in emerging tech companies is the platform, right? They go out and they spend a lot of time and money and effort in building a platform, but they're not really solving a very specific problem. They're sort of trying to solve a more generalized problem, and seeing it, like we can solve for all this stuff, and our potential market is this enormous thing. But the problem is like they don't ever focus on solving a specific problem that has value to a customer. And like you said, the product is king, and if you have a product that solves a very specific problem that a customer has, and then you build around that, I think you have much more potential to build a sustainable company and have a value proposition that's easy to communicate to the market,
Yeah, and I so agree. And I think we tend to write off the fact that like if you have a great product, then communicating the value proposition is super simple.
No.
Like, that tends to be hard work, and that's why I think a lot of our marketers still have jobs. It's hard work across the board, and like starting these businesses from the ground up, like you might be a king product organization, but then at the end of the day, if you can't build a sales force to go out and sell something, if you've got a complex product, right? And there should be complex products out there. Like I think that's a niche that people aren't building for, is like there are complex problems. Those tend to require complex products. If you don't have a sales force selling that complex product, like and you can't build that out, you're going to fail. If you don't have marketing built out in a way where people can understand what the hell you're talking about, you're going to fail. Like, and all of those things are stacked together. Product is king, but then executing on sales and marketing and all those things, those are things that as an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter how good your engineers are. It doesn't matter how good your product team is. If you can't build a sales team, you've got a complex product for the enterprise, that's going to be a long journey.
So how do you do that? So how do you build like a great sales team for your company? What's your strategy to find the best people in the field?
That's actually a wonderful question. So, and interestingly enough, I think that we've made a series of iterations on thinking about sales. We had this hypothesis around velocity and how you could potentially take someone who had this mindset of velocity, bring them to the enterprise, and then you're going to get like maybe hybrid of both worlds. That thesis ended up failing for multiple reasons. But I think the person that we had brought in on that front actually got it right, which is building great sales organizations doesn't start with finding the greatest salespeople in the world. It starts with building a great culture.
Yes.
And what this person ended up doing is they were like, hey, I'm the first non-engineer into this organization. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to sit, our engineering team sits in Montreal. And so I'm going to go to Montreal and I'm going to give an overview to that team as to what sales is and what we do. And what ended up happening is I think we have an engineering organization these days that understands how hard sales is and what's implicated in it and the type of work that these guys go through. And we also did something interesting is we made our comp plans quite public around like, this is how much salespeople can make if they're great at their job. And I think that what that ended up turning into, and then what we did was we made the comp plans public and we said, by the way, you can join the sales team, but you're going to feel the same types of pressures that salespeople are going to feel. So like, you got to hit your quota. If you're not hitting quota, like it means you're not generating the returns from the business. And so I think it starts with culture.
Yeah.
And that's really where
For sure.
I think this early hire that we had made made an incredible stride. And Adam, if you happen to be listening in, like that's his legacy and what he built in the organization. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but holy shit, that worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it starts with culture. And then I think the second piece is agency. And I think the greatest sales reps and kind of the way that we're running the organization, and who knows if this thesis is actually going to play out and be the right way to do it, is almost like a franchise, right? Which is these salespeople are essentially running their business, right? And when you hear the best of the best, they talk about my business, my book of accounts, like my things, right? And they're running their business almost as like a franchise owner goes out and runs their business. They're like trying to operate it. They're trying to make it super profitable and all that stuff. And I think if you take the approach of these salespeople are running their business and you don't need to get in their way, what you need is to enable them to run that business super effectively. And then you need to effectively learn about best practices and bring them to the other franchises and the other salespeople. Then that's a really cool agency-based model where our guys have the ability to go out, they run their business, we don't tell them how to do their job. What we end up saying is like, here's what we expect from a reporting purpose. Like, this is what we want in Salesforce. This is ultimately what it said.
Right.
Because I need to use that to learn about movement, momentum of deals, and I need to use that to be able to forecast. But at the end of the day, what I want you to do is run your business very, very effectively.
Yeah.
So those I think are the two core pieces, is like agency and culture. And then what we found is if those are central pillars, what you are going to need is to have the underlying foundation from a messaging perspective, from a product perspective. And that's really, really hard work to do. And so like, unfortunately, I think a lot of founders, as they're learning to do that, it translates into salespeople feeling like they've got the lack of agency because the founder has to be there all the time to learn the underlying foundation. And so I think right now what we've got is two early stage guys that have this incredible ability to just sit into these meetings, not feel like they're being stepped on because I'm in most of these meetings, but really kind of making it be a collaborative relationship where I'm learning to build the foundation. I trust them to do their job.
That's
they
right.
go out, execute on it, and those three things I think come together into creating a kick-ass sales organization.
Yeah, no, totally. And because I'm in the sales side, that warms my heart, right? One of the things that we've been talking about is there's been a lack of loyalty to people's organizations, right? You're starting to see more of the turnover. You know, it was cool back in the day where somebody would go to a company and be there for 10 years, right? They'd be a salesperson there for 10 years. They'd believe in the company. They'd believe in the product. They're going to customers with enthusiasm. And then they're also holding their own company accountable, right? It's like, we said we're going to do this for this customer. We need to do this, you know? Yeah. It's to find those people that just give a shit, you know? I think it's awesome when you find them. It's harder to find them these days.
Yeah. And I would say like Reid Hoffman talks about the tour of duty these days, right? And how like the millennials have like a very short half-life within the organizations. And if you bring them in for like, you're going to do a tour of duty and like, you're going to have this impact on the organization. It's like, great. Like I can buy into that. And like, I can buy into like people like that model. But I think the greatest salespeople in the world realize that, their customer isn't the customer just for that company. And there is a point in time where like the reps in our regions, like they're going to have milked the shit out of the region. They're going to have generated a ton of value and they will have gotten compensated for that. And there is a point in time when it's time to just like, and then it's a different type of salesperson, which is the like, upsell, like kind of like value extraction salesperson instead of the people who really like are fundamentally believers in the underlying product. Yeah. And there's a time where they transition now to like the next early stage company where they go in and they do that. And so I think having a very honest conversation with those early stage reps around like, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to be a part of this organization now and like grow into an RD, grow into like a VP of a region or something like that? Or do you want to like very specifically go out, sell, be that early evangelist, like do the thing that you've been doing for a long time and just repeat with the next company? And I've got reps that fall on both sides of the table, and I've had those conversations with reps, and like many of them love that. And I think what we've seen, the unfortunate side of that coin is I think people just started inflating titles in sales quite a bit, where you've got like RD titles for people who are still reps on individual accounts. And it's just like, guys, at the end of the day, we're salespeople. Like, let's be salespeople. Like
Senior Director of Global Enterprise Sales. It's like, so you're a sales guy, right? So basically you're my sales guy. Okay, cool. That's all I really needed to know.
Yeah. So I would say like for the salespeople, like have an honest conversation with the founder that you're going to work with around like, what are you actually looking for? Like, like you're coming in, it's like, there's no rep. Like, are you going to be there and you're going to regionally direct like 60 people? No, like, right. Like, let's go. Like, let's go sell. Let's have fun. Let's learn. And then let's grow into that role if that's what we choose to do.
Sure.
And so that's been heartwarming for me to just like these reps are like sometimes multiples of my age, and they're teaching me so many different things. And I've had just this love and appreciation for learning the art and seeing what they can do. And I frankly just love working with every one of them.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, click like, hit that subscribe button. That helps tremendously. And if you want to get notified when we post part 2 of this video podcast, click on that bell icon and you'll get a notification. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.